Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the Darting Around podcast. My name is Jesse Dart, your host for today, and we're delighted to bring you a brand new show to discuss all the stats, the insights and the excitement of the Australian Football League. My host is a man that I've known for a little while now. He knows his footy better than most. Jaden Griffin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jesse. Very excited to have this underway. We've been excited to do this for a long time because we both just think that AFL media currently is just not very good. It's not very in-depth. A lot of the people just got there because they were ex-famous players and they don't really know very much about the game, I feel like. So it should be good.
Yeah, for sure. So today we're just going to talk about something nice and easy, which is the midfields. Now, it is very much where all the Brownlow votes go. We see that quite often, and midfields do very much make or break a team in that respect. So what we've done is today, Jane, we've broken up into, basically 5 tiers essentially now with what we've got. So we've got Tier 1, which is the absolute best of the best in the competition. We've got Tier 2, who either were probably there at one point or are very close to being there now. Tier 3, who are dependable players that you can always rely on in your midfield. Then P-platers, who have shown they can do it, but aren't quite there yet. And then Limbo. I'll let you explain this category, Jaden, because you're a bit of a Limbo man in this regard.
So the Limbo tier for me is something that I think these players have been Tier 2, if not Tier 1 in the past. But either they haven't had the adaptability or they've been sort of one-season wonders and just haven't really been able to keep it up. I still think it's very important to talk about because they obviously do have the talent. But yeah, I just think they're important to talk about pretty much because it's interesting.
For sure. So we'll get straight into things now with Tier 1. We've picked 4 players in the competition for Tier 1. Interestingly enough for me, I think this is the big thing that stuck out before we started, was the fact that all 4 of our Tier 1 players are almost dual position players now. All 4 of them can go forward. All 4 of them are midfield bulls. How do you assess that dual position for what we've done in this criteria?
Yeah, so I think it's super important being adaptable, being able to. These players, basically, you can't take them out of the game. And that's what separated them above these other midfielders who, can't break a tag and many other flaws in their game. I just feel like these Tier 1 players are just incredible players. They have so much versatility and they bring so much value to a team. And that's why they're in there.
So we'll get straight into things. First one, this is in no particular order, by the way, within the tier. It's just we've put them all together. Marcus Bontempelli,
yeah.
Tier 1. Reasoning?
He's an incredible player. He's the kind of player who he doesn't need a lot of ball to have a lot of impact. Heavy on the kicks, absolute beautiful disposal. Goes forward, kicks a goal, takes contested marks. He's just incredible. I still think he's the heart and soul of that Bulldogs lineup. That he can take over a game with as little as 15 touches, and yeah, I just think he definitely deserves to be here.
And I would argue the Bulldogs are close to the best midfielder in the competition in terms of talent, and there's a reason Bont always gets the tag. It's because he is the game breaker in that team.
Exactly, he definitely is. He can take over a quarter, he can take over a game. He forces that pressure, right? That just other players just don't do. Almost none of his touches are cheap, and yeah, he has a role. He plays it so well.
So we go from a midfield with a lot of key players to a midfield with just one. We'll go to Carlton first with Patrick Cripps. Now, Cripps, for me, we've seen it over the years now. He's been very good for a very long time. He's always been in the conversation for the Brownlow because of his impact. One stat that I think really stuck out for me, this is going into this week's round of footy, is he gets 5 more contested possessions per game on average than he does uncontested possessions. You take a player like that out of this young developing Carlton side, they're possibly even bottom 4. Just because of the impact he can have on that team.
No doubt in my mind. If not the bottom side. It's something that Carlton specifically has struggled a lot with, is that contested ball, those hard ball gets, and also with Cruiser on our other side, our rucks have not been good, and so we've really needed someone like Cripps to just charge through everybody, force those clearances, get those contested handballs, and really get the ball moving.
Now I'm just going to pull you up there, Jaden, as well. Are you a Carlton man yourself? Are you?
I am.
Is that your alliance?
I'm a blue bagger. It's been a long and difficult and winding road, but I love my boys. I think what we've done with Teague has been really, really good. I've loved the development of boys like Cripps and Walsh and stuff. But yeah, it's been a lot of heartbreak, I'm not going to lie.
He's complaining about a long road to a Fremantle supporter. And look, and on that note, we're going to move into our next one. And look, I don't think anyone would have any kind of issue with this man being in the top tier. 2 Brownlow medals. We talked about heart and soul with Bontempelli. This man is the heart and soul of Fremantle. Captain of the club. Played on with a broken leg in 2015 in the prelim. Nat Fyfe. He is every bit as good as he's made out to be, I think. Obviously, I've got a bit of bias being a Fremantle. But Jaden, I'll get your perspective on that. Is he the best player in the last kind of 5-10 years, or damn close to it?
I mean, for me, I don't even think there's an argument for anyone else at number one, personally. I think he's shown time and time again just how amazing of a player he is. He can do it all. He has a beautiful disposal. He's a contested animal. He'll lay 20 tackles if he needs to. He's just an animal.
If he's in a Victorian side, a Carlton, a Richmond, a whoever, even like a St Kilda, for argument's sake, is he talked about a lot more in terms of the all-time greats?
Oh, definitely. The West, as much as I don't like the whole Vic bias argument. There is definitely a lot of truth to it. I think it's overblown a little bit, but yeah, I think Fife is very, very underappreciated purely because he does play for a West Australian side in a lot of that traditional AFL media. A lot of people, I think, are just excited to see him when he falls and want to focus on that, but they don't really talk about just how good he is enough.
And I think the big point for me with Fife is obviously the 2 Brownlow medals, but the fact this season is every time he's gone forward, Taberner's had a career game because there's so much attention that goes to Fife. And I think Taberner's having a great season at Fremantle. I think he's done a really good job. I think he's come a long way. But just that extra element of fear that Fife brings into that backline, because when we talked about this off camera the other day with Neil and the comparison, which we'll get to in a bit more detail later on, but when Fife goes forward, when he's playing on Lockie earlier in the season, he kicks, 4 goals?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what a great move. I don't know if it was the coaching staff or if Fife moved himself down there. Who knows with that man? He's an absolute genius. But yeah, like to cop that tag from Neil, it seems like a really good thing to do on paper. And then he just goes forward, takes 4 contested marks, kicks 4 goals. Like, who else can realistically do that?
The only other ones you could argue are in this tier with him.
Exactly, and that's what we've been saying the whole time about that versatility, not being able to shut them out of the game. One way or another, they will force themselves into a role that has impact, and that's why they're all here.
Now, what's interesting to me is 3 of these 4 are one-club players. The last one we're going to get to isn't, though. That's Patrick Dangerfield, who's come across, obviously, from Adelaide to Geelong, which seems to be a bit of a trend now. A lot of players seem to be making that trip. I mean, Josh Jenkins has just made a little holiday home out there in the Cattery.
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much Adelaide to Geelong or just getting away from Adelaide, being the absolute terrible club that they seem to have devolved into. But yeah, no, you're right. The other 3 are one-club players. I don't really see that changing, but aside from maybe some absolute ridiculous offer from North or St Kilda. But yeah, Danger's a bit different. He sort of made a name for himself at Adelaide, and I think there was a lot of hype when he came over to Geelong, and if I'm being honest, I definitely think he's delivered. I don't necessarily think he's the best person. He definitely has a few... he has a few outbursts, he plays for a few free kicks and whatnot, but his impact on the game is definitely undeniable.
He has his quirks for sure, I think that's fair to say.
It definitely is.
But I just think with Dangerfield, and we've talked about this with all the other 3 players, and this will probably become a bit more obvious when we get into Tier 2 a bit more, but if you look at these Tier 1 players, you would give your left arm for these guys to be at your club. These are players that change game, and it's ironic because only one of them have won a flag.
Yeah,
which is interesting, I think, when you look at it that way.
It is very interesting. I think a part of that is obviously because a lot of the clubs that are already good, they don't go looking for these super high impact players. They're trying to fill roles that they're missing. And so it's very hard. I think, Bont has a flag. Danger and Fife could have easily had flags.
Yeah.
Probably both arguably should have. Cripps, obviously, he's at Carlton. What can you say?
You're absolutely right there. But you look at also these 4 teams now as well. Bulldogs, cusp of finals, maybe. Carlton and Fremantle both have serious work to do and need results to go their way, including the Bulldogs falling apart. Dangerfield's the only one here realistically with a premiership chance this year.
And again, he's at Geelong, so does he really?
The preliminary final cup.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's you almost wonder, for the guys that haven't won the flag, so Cripps, Fife, Danger in this category, do they need a flag for their legacy, do you feel like?
Personally, for me, I don't think so. Fife is a player that I'm going to remember for a very, very long time. I've seen him do it for so many years. Dangerfield as well. I think Cripps will be there and Bont will definitely be there. But for me, the flag is in no way why Bont is in this list for me.
Yeah, that's true. I think of the 4 there, I think Dangerfield needs one the most, purely because he moved. I think with all the other 3...
And he's had the best support rate, realistically.
Yeah, for sure. But if you look at that, Fife has stayed at Fremantle for, a decade now. Cripps has been at Carlton for about 6 years. Bont about the same. So, for Dangerfield, he's been at Geelong now for about, 4 or 5 years now?
Yeah, think about that, yeah.
Because he missed 2017 with Adelaide, So he's definitely Geelong at that point.
Yep.
I think 2016 was the year he started playing for Geelong. So he's been there 4 or 5 seasons now. I do just wonder with him, does he need the flag more than the rest?
I think so for sure. He's had guys like Joel Selwood, Menegola. He's had such good support around him. Obviously Gary Ablett came back. Mitch Duncan. He's got great players around him more so than I think you can say for the other players. Not that Cripps, Bonds and Fife don't have good players around them, because they obviously do. But yeah, it would definitely help Dangerfield more. I think that's the reason he moved, right? He moved for a flag.
Yeah.
Because he obviously puts a lot of value on that for himself. And so, yeah, I definitely think he needs it more than the others.
On the supporting cast argument, Cripps, I think it's fair to say, hasn't had much help, ever. Fife, for the last 3-4 years, has more or less done it himself. Bond has had kind of bursts of help where players have stepped up and played a big role. I think 2016 was very much a generational period for the Bulldogs in terms of everyone hit their peak at the exact same time.
Oh, for sure. It's not something you could ever even really try to replicate. I think Bond has been lucky in the fact that he's always had a very, very good midfield around him, but his team has always struggled going forward and also transitioning defensively. So I think, while he has definitely had the extra help in the midfield, he's still the one that takes all the pressure. And going forward for the Dogs has been a real struggle, and also just transitioning out of defence. And Bond has had his little stint as a rebound defender. He goes forward when he needs to. So I think he's a massive part of that.
If you're a club that doesn't have one of these players, if you're North and St Kilda are fantastic examples, you came to them before. If you're a North or a St Kilda, what are you throwing at the 4 clubs that have these players to get them over? You have to throw the checkbook and more.
You definitely do. Anything you can do to get a player like this that will really elevate your team, I think you have to do it. I think we've seen St Kilda and North, they've sort of done this dance with trying to get big signings, and I think they always end up settling. They probably throw too much money at a player they shouldn't, when they should really just all in for someone like this.
No, you paid Jared Pollock marquee wages.
Exactly right. How did that work out for him?
And that's too, because of course remember a few years ago when Dustin Martin was being really seriously talked about going to North Melbourne, and they've just had this problem where they'll identify a marquee player, and they'll settle for a player that's 40% of the quality, and that's not even a dig on Jared Pollock necessarily. It's just, I think he's a symptom of the problem that North and St Kilda have.
For sure.
And you look at Saints now, who are doing okay this season. It's because they've brought in players like Hunter Clark. They've brought in younger players through the draft. They've done it their way. They've got a list now that is competitive, but they've done it in a way that it didn't look like they were capable of doing for a very long time.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's a key part of that is development, right? You can't just bring in, as much as these players are a massive impact, they're not going to fix everything.
No.
And they have to understand that you've got to develop young talent. You've got to really create part players that complement these high impact players. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. And I think if Dusty did go to North, it would have been a dumpster fire, because I don't think they had anywhere near the system that Richmond had built to allow Dusty to thrive. And he's got his quirks. He struggles with discipline sometimes, and he's also a very momentum based player. And so yeah, if I was North Melbourne and St Kilda, I would definitely be trying to get one of these players. But it is by no means the way they win a flag. There's still a lot of work to do, but it would be a good start.
Well, while we're talking about Dusty, it's probably a great spot to transition into Tier 2. So just to recap, our Tier 1 players were Bontempelli, Cripps, Fife, and Patrick Dangerfield. Into Tier 2, we'll start with Dusty. We'll start with him as we're talking about him now. I think he has the same kind of impact level as some of the Tier 1 guys. I just think he doesn't do it enough, and that his Brownlow season was more of a statistical anomaly than a Tier 1 season, if that makes sense.
100%. I think it was such an outlier season for him. They really developed a lot of what that team did around Dustin Martin's high impact. The way that they just forced in fitness and scrappy football to really let Martin thrive, I think is why it's still probably the best individual season I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But like you said, I don't think he has been able to back it up as much as I think people would expect. And I think just because he's at Richmond, a successful Victorian club, he gets a lot more praise than he should.
I genuinely think if he had one more season at similar output to that 2017 one, you could argue him for Tier 1, and he would honestly probably get there. I just think he's almost a Tier 1.5. And he was so close to getting it. I just think, for me, especially now he's gotten on a bit now, I just think Tier 2 is about right for him at this stage in his career. Maybe he was a Tier 1 going at this time 2 years ago. Maybe he was.
Oh, I think it's hard to argue after that season that he wasn't Tier 1. But, and how much of it, this is an interesting argument, but how much of it do you think is mental with he felt like he achieved everything he needed to do? I mean, how many people have ever Norm Smith grand final Brownlow in a year?
It's a phenomenal season.
It really was. And did he just kind of lose a little bit of that drive, do you think?
To an extent, I feel like. And I think that's probably why Richmond brought in the players that they did. Because, you have guys that have been there. Obviously, Jack Reed would have been there a long time. Dusty been there quite a while. Cox had been there many years. Cox is probably a bit of an outlier in that one. But they did have players that had, toiled away, and then they got what they needed to do. So they hit their zenith. So I think, and we'll come to this in an episode later on, which we'll talk about at the end of this show, with regards to Richmond. But I do think they needed to bring in those players. And I think it almost kind of gave Dusty and the rest a bit of a kick up the backside almost.
Yeah, no, for sure. You're 100% right, yeah.
So moving on now, Scott Pendlebury, Tier 2 from me. I think you were similar in that thinking, or were you
definitely. Yeah. Pendlebury's someone I've had a lot of respect for so long. He doesn't necessarily have that breakneck speed or anything. He doesn't necessarily break lines, but his disposal is impeccable. He uses the ball so well. He finds the footy. He gets his clearances. He gets his tackles. And just week in and week out, you know exactly how much you're going to get out of Pendlebury. And Collingwood I think he's a huge part to the reason why Collingwood have managed to stay good for a long time. And he's just about all Australian every year, and I think that's well deserved.
Yeah, and it's just an interesting stat as well that isn't really talked about enough. He actually does come from a basketball background as well. Which I think does add that extra. I'm kidding.
Really, I've never heard that before.
No, it's a new one.
Please elaborate.
No, we're not the bounce. This isn't AFL 360. You didn't change the channel. But no, in all seriousness, though, Pendlebury, phenomenal player. I think he's probably the most skillful player, arguably in the top 2 tiers that we've got so far. I think in terms of his actual ball use, I think he's probably the best. The only other one you could maybe argue is possibly a Travis Boak on his day in terms of his core skills.
Yeah, but I think Pendlebury just has that composure, right? You almost never see him look panicked. He almost never gets caught with the ball. You almost always see him make the best decision he could have in whatever situation he's in.
Yeah. Travis Boak, mentioned him before, we'll come to him now. Tier 2 player for me. I just think he was probably a Tier 3 coming into this season. I just think he's hit his consistent best again. I think not being the captain helps him a lot. I think he can focus on one. He's definitely a leadership material. I just think he gets a bit caught up in it.
He definitely does. He's someone that needs to focus on his own game a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's good that he was able to identify that, because I agree. Last year, I thought he was incredible. I thought he had such a good year. Obviously, Port haven't really had the season they've wanted for a while. But I think whatever success they have found, a large part of that is attributed to Boak. And then this year, he definitely came out of the gate slowly. I was a bit worried. I thought he might have been getting on in his years, but he's picked it up towards this middle part of the season, and I think he's back to up near his best.
I think skill-wise, you can't argue Boak anywhere else but Tier 2. Lachie Neale was, I think, one we had a bit of back and forth on in this one. I don't think he is far off being Tier 1. I think almost after this season, you could argue him for it, especially if he absolutely pants him in the Brownlow, which he probably should, in fairness, given this season he's had. But I just don't think he can't break a tag. And we saw that against St Kilda. Seb Ross keeps into no clearances for the first time since 2015. You need, to be an impact player, that can't happen.
It definitely can't, and I completely agree. I think definitely Neale is the closest out of these Tier 2 players to probably being in Tier 1. I just think if we had him in there, he would have been a little bit ham-fisted, because we can't make the same argument for Neale as we did for the other 4 players. So we've left him in Tier 2. But yeah, he's an incredible player. He finds so much of the footy, loves a good handball, really good with his metres gained, incredibly fit player. There's very little I can say that's bad about Lachie Neale, but when he does get that attention, you can see him struggle.
Now, I want to talk about these 3 together, because I think you can almost say the same thing for all 3 of them. That's Adam Treloar, Jack McRae, and Tom Mitchell. I want to talk about these 3 together. Obviously, Mitchell probably gets a little bit of an asterisk because he has that Brownlow to his resume, the other 2 don't. But, I mean, they're great for your 30 disposals and your multi, but it's just too many outside handballs for me.
Yeah, is a season of averaging 45 touches and there are uncontested handballs that impressive? I mean, obviously, there's not many players that can do it, but for me, yeah, these players, they find a lot of footy. They struggle in the area of disposal efficiency for me. I think And a lot of their touches, they come from 1-2s. It looks very good on the stat sheet, but for the eye test, for me, they don't hit the same as some of the other players we've talked about. I
think I'll never forget the game. It was Fremantle Hawthorn 2018, probably mid-season. Mitchell gets 42 touches, 2 goals. It was a phenomenal game, and it was his Brownlow year. Deserved the 3 votes that night, of course. But he's almost stopped doing that now. I think, in fairness, he has 5 or 6 games a year where he does make a genuine bona fide impact.
Oh, of course, as do Treloar and McRae as well.
But there's too many games for all 3 of these guys for me. And we saw it in the in the Western Bulldogs Geelong game on the Friday night, which was last night for the time of recording, where McRae, he can get worried out of it, and he does seem to get a lot of free kicks in his favour. So I just think, Treloar, I think Treloar's a tough one for me because he's what we hear in the media a lot as this star player, this phenom, and we hear it to go in. I know we'll come to him in a later episode. I know you.
I have my thoughts on to go in.
I know you do. But I just think Treloar's almost unlucky in that he's overhyped by the media, and it's pretty obvious. Even if you just go through, and you shouldn't do this at home. It is a health warning, but you shouldn't go through a Collingwood Facebook comment section.
Oh no,
you shouldn't do it. But
you definitely shouldn't.
But the sentiment is that he does waste a lot of his disposal, which I think is fair.
For me, the biggest knock on Treloar is that he can't kick. He can't do it, and that's how that's going forward inside 50, being able to hit a target, being able to actually have an effective clearance is so big in today's modern game because it's so quick. With the 666, you can really take advantage of those fast clearances. And if you can't hit a target, I'm sorry, you can't be even in consideration for that tier 1. Just because he finds so much ball, and he does get a lot of contested, and he lays a lot of tackles. I think he deserves to be in tier 2, but I don't think he's anywhere close to the conversation for tier 1 yet.
No, I don't think so. I think he needs. I think Collingwood. He's another player I think would really benefit from a flag.
For sure.
For his legacy. I think some of these players, it doesn't necessarily matter. Like Clayton Oliver, who we'll come to now, doesn't necessarily matter if he doesn't win a flag. He's at Melbourne. Their expectation is what it is. They had a fantastic season a couple of years ago. Hasn't worked out. We'll come to Simon Goodwin on a later episode, I'm sure, but I don't think he is the right man for the job now. I think that window's passed. But Oliver, for me, he almost feels that similar shoe to the other 3 we talked about before, but he does get a lot of contested footy, and he does really make an impact on that stat sheet.
He does. He's almost like game dependent on whether or not he's going to be your Titch, McRae, Treloar type, or he's going to be more of a Neil, with the heavy meters gained, the heavy contested ball, the clearances. He can definitely do it all. I think he also struggles with disposal efficiency, and he's helped a lot with having Gawn as his ruckman. He maybe if that really good Melbourne year a couple of years ago, you could have argued he was really pushing for that tier 1 spot.
He was at the door. He was at the door for sure.
He definitely was, but I think he has a lot to work on in his game at the moment, but he's an incredible player nonetheless. Definitely deserved to be in tier 2.
I think the one thing that will always hold Oliver back from being tier 2, the other ones in tier 1 don't have, is that Oliver desperately needs a Robin. We saw it with Angus Brayshaw. We're seeing it now with Petrarca. And Oliver's having a great season this year. Don't take anything away from that at all. He's having a great season. But he does need that secondary, whereas especially Cripps and Fife, and arguably Dangerfield to an extent, haven't needed that for a long time. Yeah. Danger for a couple of years ran that Geelong midfield more or less by himself.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Fife and Cripps have been doing that now for at least half a decade, if not more in some cases. So Oliver is a player, and there's nothing wrong with needing support.
Of course not.
Everyone needs support, but
there's 18 people on the field, 22 people play each week.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. It's not a one-man show, it never will be.
Fife had Neil for a bit, sure, but especially looking... Neil, you got to remember, Neil was only really peak at Fremantle for probably a season and a half, 2 seasons top.
And Neil's best was mostly while Fife was out, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's definitely an argument that's worth mentioning, but I also feel like it's a bit irrelevant in terms of the fact that Neil definitely hit his peak after he left Fife, which was always going to happen. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. And as a friend of I'm really glad to see him doing well. And he deserves it, because he was such a good guy around the club. And there will be an episode, I'm sure, down the track about Fremantle's club culture, which is something I can talk about for hours. But you just look at a guy like Oliver. He needs support. He does a bit. And also, I think another man that does need a bit is Stephen Kinnear, who we'll come to now.
Yeah.
I think he's probably a standout in Joe versus midfield. But because he's a player like Bontempelli, like Cripps, like Fife, doesn't need to have 25 touches and 2 goals every week to make his impact. He can have his 20 touches, make a lot of tackles, cause a lot of problems for that midfield, and change the game that way, for me.
Yeah, I 100% agree. He knows where to be. He reads the play incredibly well. He goes forward when he needs to. He can be a goal sneak. He can take a set shot. He can even, for a small dude, he can take a contested mark too, which is a super valuable skill to have. But yeah, for me, he's that standout GWS midfielder. I really like what he does. He's an absolute gun for me.
Now, one we had a bit of a back and forth on is the two Kellys. Not related, very different people. Tim Kelly at West Coast.
Yeah.
I said 2, you said 3.
Yeah.
Josh Kelly at GWS. I've said 3, you've said 2. Now, I can definitely make arguments for both. We'll start with Josh Kelly, because he's finalised in our tier 2. So we have gone with Tim Kelly in tier 3 and Josh Kelly in tier 2. So we'll come to Josh Kelly now. I just think, for me, he hasn't done it long enough to be at tier 2. That's my argument for him being in 3. Your argument for him being in 2 is?
My argument... So I think at his peak, he was... he's another one knocking on the door for tier 1 for me. I think he has shown he's an individual machine. He finds so much of the football, and there's a lot of things that he can really just do it on his own. Contested footy, tackles, he takes marks, his meters gained is insane. And I think he's been really unlucky with injuries. And that's part of the game. You miss your footy. It happens. But yeah, for me, at his peak, he is just an absolute phenom, and I love to watch him. I love to watch him play footy.
Yeah, for sure. We'll come to Kelly. He'll be our first mention, or Tim Kelly rather, in tier 3. The last one I want to mention, this man, for me, honestly could have been tier 1. I think the one reason that I will never have him as a tier 1 midfielder is look at the fact that West Coast won the flag without him. And they did it for 8 weeks without him. And that's Andrew Gaff. Especially now that he's been swamped with other support, I think his time's up to be that top 4 or 5 midfielder in the competition. I still think he's arguably top 10. I think he's definitely top 20. Without question. But Gaff, especially now he's kind of being shunted out of midfield. Look at West Coast midfield now, and he's a phenomenal midfielder.
It is a phenomenal
And most of these guys will come up later. But Tim Kelly, Elliot Yeo, Dom Sheed, Luke Shuey, these guys are all very capable players. So for Gaff to be out on the wing...
And Nick Nat as well, right? That is obviously a massive help.
Oh, yeah. And Nick Nat's having a career year now.
He is.
I thought he was done a couple of seasons ago. He's, in fairness in that, he's bounced back massively. But Gaff, he just doesn't... He doesn't have that impact.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think he's almost even someone in this new West Coast system that has almost evolved into a winger. You don't... And that... That's not to take anything away from him when he was their main contested ball winner. His disposal's obviously very good. He can hit a target. He can hit a 5-cent piece. I think he's an amazing kick. Good with his hands as well.
Very good with his hands.
but yeah, I don't know. He's just really devolved in this new West Coast system, which we'll talk about this more when we get into the other guys. But it's probably hard to stand out in that system. So it's hard to knock him too much, which is why we still have him in tier 2.
Yeah.
There probably a few people might even drop him down to tier 3 because, like you said, that 8-week stretch where West Coast won a flag without him, that says a lot. That just says a lot about the kind of player that he is. Not that he's not incredible, but that there are almost other people that can fill his role. Whether it's 1, 2, 3 people, it can be done.
To play a game of swings and roundabouts here, Gaff doesn't punch Brayshaw, doesn't get suspended, plays in that team, wins the grand final. Whether or not the margins change is irrelevant. They win the grand final. Is he still playing in the midfield every week, or has Simpson looked at that stretch and said he can fill another role? Because for me, I will still have Gaff in the heart of my midfield every week. I'm very surprised he's out in the wing.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's his role. I think he is an inside midfielder. So I'm very surprised he's there. If he doesn't get suspended, doesn't miss the flag, is he still there week in, week out?
100%. I think there's no argument against it. I think even if he does get suspended and even West Coast lose that grand final or drop in the prelim, then I think you still have to keep him there. It's definitely like you said, Simpson proved that it can be done without him, and it's kind of just it's been a slight knock on him as a player. But yeah, you're right. If he doesn't get suspended there and wins the flag with them, he's week in a week. He might even be in tier 1 at this point.
Very possible
with what he was able to do while he was in there.
Right, so we'll come to tier 3 now. So just a quick recap of our tier 2. We had Scotty Pendlebury, Lachie Neale, Josh Kelly, Clayton Oliver, Travis Boak, Tom Mitchell, Dustin Martin, Jack McRae, Adam Treloar, Stephen Killileo, and Andrew Gaff. So we had 11 in tier 2. I think that's probably about right.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of arguments you could make for a lot of the tier 3 guys, and then there's a lot of guys we haven't put in at all. But yeah, we've made this decision on just players with the impact, right? That's the key word, the impact.
Yeah. So tier 3, we said we come to Tim Kelly first in tier 3. I think that's fair enough because he probably, of all the guys in this, he's probably the one that's closest to 2 for me.
Yep. No, I 100% agree.
So my argument was, yes, he's only done it for 2.5 seasons now, but my goodness, has he done it? And he made Geelong a lot better. I think if he's still in that midfield now and they don't have to rely... If Duncan can play his role on the wing and be left alone to do that, they're probably even a bit better than they are now.
100%.
I don't think Duncan can play that midfield role the way that... I genuinely think a midfield of... Guthrie's definitely benefited from Kelly going out.
Definitely.
But I still feel like a midfield of Guthrie, Kelly, Dangerfield... Some sort of rotation involving Menegola and the rest. Even Parfitt coming in. He's
even Lukey Dallas can step in there, right?
I just think Kelly stays this year at Geelong. They arguably get a lot shorter for that flag.
Oh, no, 100%. He was incredible when he played at Geelong. He had the best first year I've ever seen. Obviously, unfortunately, we didn't get to see Matty Rowell this year. We'll talk a bit more about him later. But... yeah, it was a big hit to Geelong. I think they're probably a little bit overperforming at the moment. I didn't expect them to be so good after losing Kelly because I did think he was absolutely incredible for them.
Yeah.
I just don't... Obviously, he's benefited West Coast a lot. I just don't really know if they've found the perfect place for him in their system yet, which is why I sort of argued for him to be in Tier 3 because 2 years is not a really long stretch. Obviously, it's impressive when you can just drop into that Geelong midfield and be so impactful. Yeah. And he is another one. He's very versatile. He loves a goal. He's just a really, really good player, but I just don't think he's shown that Tier 2 capability yet at the Eagles.
I do think it's really hard to grade all the West Coast players. And this isn't a Kelly problem, it's not a Gaffron, it's all of them. It's really tough to grade them when there's 5 players getting 20 plus touches every week. There's about 8 or 9 getting plus 15 that rotate through their midfield. It's really tough to grade these guys based on their impact on the game because, Kelly, Gaff, we'll come to Yo in a bit, we'll come to Sheed in a bit. Well, we may as well just talk about them now because they're all together in this regard. So, Tier 3 specifically is Tim Kelly, Elliot Yo, Dom Sheed. West Coast have 4 players in the top 3 tiers. That's a surplus already because you don't have 3 in there at one time. They've got a surplus in midfield talent. No wonder they're a serious premiership chance, especially with the team they've got. I think personally, and Messrs does hurt me as a Freo fan, I think this might be one of the best teams on paper I've ever seen. They have a really good side.
They do. They look, and we were talking about it as well, right? When you're talking about your worst player being someone like Oscar Allen, who is by no means terrible, it just shows the quality of your list. And you're right. It's just the midfield is absolutely phenomenal. When your worst midfielder is someone like, say, Luke Shuey or even Jamie Cripps, they're still very, very serviceable players. And it probably is a knock on Gaff, Kelly, Yo, and Sheed because it's hard to talk about them as individuals as opposed to talking about them as a unit. Because I think they are just such a great unit. They have such good chemistry. The ball moves so well. And then throw Nick Nat in there and they're an absolute force.
Oh, for sure. No question about that. We'll move on to another duo we've got put in here that brings up Collingwood's totals to 3. We've got Taylor Adams and Steele Sidebottom in this list. Sidebottom... I think on his day he's a Tier 2 midfielder. I just think he's at the point now where he's not able to produce that week in, week out, which is absolutely fine given his age. Taylor Adams, I thought he went the other way. I thought he was quite close to being in limbo for me, Adams. I think he does get in based on the fact that he can change the game, but geez, he can have some shockers.
Oh, he definitely can. He's had a little bit of a resurgence this year, right? He's found so much of the footy this year. He's worked really well alongside Pendlebury and Grundy, I think, to just show how important he is to that Collingwood side, who have... for all intents and purposes, sort of kicked Degoe out of there purely because of guys like Taylor Adams and Steele Sidebottom.
I still think Degoe is a forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the place he's going to thrive. I think trying to ham-fist him into the midfield was a horrible mistake.
They did it with Stevenson as well, don't forget that. They tried to do it with Stevenson too. Collingwood have this obsession with this midfield rotation. When they've got 3 players that can do it by themselves.
And look, someone like Pendlebury can run out 4 quarters. Let's be real. Like I said, he doesn't have that breakneck acceleration to really break lines, but he will just follow the play all day and he'll always be where he needs to be. So they don't need to have this massively forced rotation system. They can just do what they have to do. They've got enough players. Adams, Sidebottom, Pendlebury, right there. That's
all you need. Plus Treloar.
Oh yeah, exactly.
You got a rotation. You got a perfect rotation set. You don't need to have this obsession. I mean, you throw in Degoe and Stevenson into that mix, then you've got 6 that they try to rotate through. That's too much.
It is far too
It's
much.
too much.
It is, and the inconsistency of guys like Stevenson and Degoe, and even to an extent, I would say Sidebottom and Adams as well.
They can have poor weeks for sure.
They really can. And one thing that's for Sidebottom, I think, he's kind of like an anti-Treloar, where his disposal's really good, but he can be shut out of the game and just not find any touches.
Well, we saw that in the Fremantle game. He nearly blew it for us in the last quarter with that goal, but in the first half he wasn't sighted. He was tagged out of the game.
Yeah.
So he definitely is capable of having those moments week in, week out. But I think tier 3 is about right for Sidebottom and Adams at the moment.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're probably... Both of them are probably the two that are closest to being dropped down into that limbo tier. But at the moment, I think it's hard to do that to them.
Yeah, moving on to another duo now. I think these two actually both came up in tier 2 conversations, but they've settled in tier 3. That's Jared Lyons and Dan Zorko. Zorko, I think, he provides a lot of support for Lachie Neale. He provides that alternate option for Lachie Neale. He provides a lot of attention for other teams. I just think now he's too much of a forward now for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think having Zorko in that Brisbane side, because as you said, he demands so much attention, is very good for Lachie Neale. But how can we really argue either of these guys for tier 2 when Neale's also in tier 2? I think Neale's pretty clearly a step above them both. So if we had Neale in tier 1, you could argue these guys being in tier 2. But yeah, I just don't really have them at quite the same level.
Look, I think that's fair. Jared Lyons is, for me, I think he's a player that every club needs. A Jared Lyons, because he'll get 20...
What a steal for Brisbane, right?
Absolutely.
What an absolute amazing pickup.
Because he'll get 20 touches every week. He'll pop up with a goal every second or third week. That's perfect when you don't need him to be your star. Brisbane don't need Jared Lyons to be their star, and yet he performs in the top 5 players in that Brisbane team every week.
So underrated at Gold Coast, I thought.
That is a phenomenal player to have in your team. If you can have a player that does that week in, week out, you're going places. And that's why Brisbane have shut up the ladder. It's just as much to do with Jared Lyons and players like that as it is to do with Lachie Neale, for me.
Of course, I 100% agree. Like we spoke about at the start, right? You can't just bring one player in to solve all your problems. It's a system, and Jared Lyons is so valuable to that side. He's had he's probably polled a few 3-vote games this year, which always helps. But yeah, he just does his role. 3
names for Brisbane's recruitment for me: Charlie Cameron, big impact; Lachie Neale, big impact; Jared Lyons, big impact. Biggest impact though, by far, is Chris Fagan. What a pickup that was.
Yeah.
And to take that risk, I was very critical of Fremantle when they picked up Josh Longmuir at the start. I wasn't sure that's what we needed at the time, was an unproven senior coach. Fagan, I think, probably came with a bit of similar... Obviously, under that Clark's system, it's a bit different, but he did come with that similar question mark. Can he do it at this level? My goodness, he can.
He definitely can. He's been amazing for that Brisbane side. They have played some genuinely very good football these last couple of years, and I've actually enjoyed watching them play, which is something I probably didn't say about Brisbane for a long time. I mean, how excited can you be about a team whose main key forward is Eric Hipwood? Let's be real.
I mean, it's not enthralling. It's not enthralling to say the least. They've had some shockers over the years, though, Brisbane. I mean, Josh Shackey at Brisbane was very much a hit or miss player.
Yeah, I mean, have they had a good forward since Jonathan Brown?
Not really.
Yeah, right.
Truthfully.
Yeah.
So look, that's kind of Brisbane's 2 taken care of. 2 from North Melbourne, which I thought was quite interesting, because you look at North Melbourne, they're not very good.
They definitely are not good.
But they do have 2 in there. That's Higgins and Ben Cunnington. Cunnington obviously been missing a bit this season, which has hurt North for sure.
Oh, it really has. They've really struggled on the contestant side, which I think is just what he's a beast, right, Cunnington? It was last year, right, where he had 31 contested touches or something.
Something obscene,
yeah. Absolutely. Like most players will go their entire career without never getting 30 touches, and this guy's getting 31 contested. He has a huge impact. He works really well with Goldstein in there. And it's the Batman and Robin thing, right? You could argue who's who, but yeah, Higgins and Cunnington work so well together. Higgins has that really clean disposal for good ball movement for North, which they've really needed, and is probably the only reason Ben Brown is good, realistically.
That's fair, but Ben Brown isn't good. I think that's one thing you're forgetting.
Well, he hasn't been good this year, but I mean, he was close to a Coleman, right? He was only like 2 goals off last year.
And Jeremy Cameron just said, nope, this is my one.
Yeah, big jazz.
Another 2 I want to talk about here. I think, no question, at one point JPK was tier 2 for me. I think now he's tier 3. That's his role. Luke Parker, I think, has always been a tier 3 player. I think he's the perfect embodiment of a tier 3 player for me. And that may sound like a criticism. It's not meant to be one. Him and Jared Lyons, for me, are very similar in that regard. They're going to get you 20 touches. They're going to bob up with a goal every now and then. They're going to be consistently your top 5 players. I think Parker's resume, I think, says it all. His consistency, he's got that flag. He's been in the club, has been very good for very many years now, and he's always been a key part of that.
Yeah, he definitely has. I'm much more of a fan of JPK, to be honest. I like him much more as a player. I think he's done it for longer. But it's hard to argue against Luke Parker. He's done it aside JPK for so long, has his impact week in and week out, gets his touches, has a few best on ground performances each year. It's probably been unfortunate for both of them with how, I guess, not good Sydney have been these last couple of years. But yeah, I don't know. They're both very, very good players, and you would not say no to having them on your team.
Yeah, just a couple more to go here. Two at Essendon now. We've got Dylan Shield, Zach Merritt together. Now, you weren't sure about this one. You thought Merritt was a bit above Shield, but I just don't think Merritt is... He's not an essential player for me. Whereas I'd take a Dylan Shield over Zach Merritt, for me, any day of the week.
Yeah, see, I still wouldn't. I would definitely take Merritt over Shield, but I definitely did agree with a lot of your points for Merritt. He's probably not essential. I think the thing that favours Merritt for me over Shield is I value Merritt's role more than I value Shield's.
That's fair. Okay, I can accept that. That's a fair argument. I just think Merritt, he's almost the byproduct of this cookie cutter system that we have right now with the TAC Cup, this generic, chop them out type thing. I mean, we've seen it, obviously we're West Australians, so we don't necessarily see it as much, but even at Waffle Colts level, you see all these young key forwards come through. We had a guy at S01, Luke Stranatica, phenomenal player, 200 centimetres, big boy, got drafted to the Fremantle, but because he was this byproduct of this, every key forward does this, he couldn't make it. He never had a chance.
Yeah.
I think Tim English was in real danger of doing that at the Bulldogs for a long time. I think even though he had a poor game against Geelong,
he got shut down.
I do think he has come a long way. I was not convinced on Tim English for a very long time, but I think he's starting to get the pieces together.
Yeah, he is. It's nice to see his consistent development too. I would really like to see someone maybe be able to challenge Gordon Grundy one day for those. Obviously, Goldstein is there some weeks, and Nick Nat, if he can string an entire season together, definitely has the capabilities. But I think Gordon Grundy, for me, have just been so incredible. But I would love to see someone like Tim English or someone, even Riley O'Brien, just come through, because I do think Rucks is a very undervalued role. But I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
A few quick ones I want to go over now. Jack Steele. Big season for St Kilda.
Huge season. Absolutely pivotal for that team. Probably the only reason they've won half as many games as they have. You pointed out, I had him tier 2 initially, which was definitely overshooting. I agree with you. He just hasn't done it for long enough. But yeah, he's had a massive impact this year. It's hard to deny.
Dunkley at the Bulldogs, I think, is fair. I obviously had a poor game last night, but there's so much talent in that Bulldogs midfield that you can't put Dunkley anywhere else because he still stands up and gets counted in a very, very crowded midfield.
Again, right, for Dunkley, my argument is Bont is tier 1, which means you can't have McRae in tier 1 because Bont is more important than McRae.
Absolutely. And
then if McRae is tier 2, for me, you can't have Dunkley in tier 2 because I think McRae is better than Dunkley.
I think Dunkley at tier 2 is about right. At tier 3 is about right. I think that's pretty much where he fits in. Looking else, have we missed anyone out there? I think that's
tier 2 done. So you want to just run through them again quickly?
So
wait, sorry. Petrarca,
yeah, fair enough. So, on that, how impactful is he for this Melbourne side?
He's been massive this year. Absolutely massive. Easily his career best season. I think he's probably been underwhelming for me. He's someone that came in with a lot of hype. Again, could be just because he's at a Victorian club, but he was very confidence based for a long time. But I think this year he's really had a huge impact.
He has for sure. So tier 3 recap is Kennedy, Dunkley, Shield, Parker, Lyons, Tim Kelly, Yeo, Sheed, Petrarca, Higgins, Cunnington, Adams, Sidebottom, Zach Merritt. Mitch Duncan, I think, is on the cusp. I think he's very much flickering between tier 3 and limbo. I think his best role is as a winger, but I don't think we can deny that he's stepped up big time this season for Geelong.
He definitely has. He's definitely one that I have him at 3 at the moment, but it could change week to week. I think he's really benefited from the role Guthrie's taken this year.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, who wouldn't benefit from having a guy like Danger around you when he cops, 3-on-1 in half the contest? So, but yeah, no, Duncan's he's a very good player.
Yeah, and Zorko and Steele are the last two. Now, this is where it gets a bit more interesting. We'll start with the P-Platters first. We'll run through the limbo ones very quickly afterwards, but the P-Platters, so these are guys that we think are very much capable of hitting probably at least tier 2 for most of these guys. At least tier 2 for the most part.
Yep,
but
definitely.
they just need to do it for a little bit longer. So we've got Andrew Brayshaw from Fremantle. I think he was one that I wasn't so sure on, but he's definitely stepped up this season to the point where he gets to be a P-Platter now, I think is fair.
No, I 100% agree. I think that stint with Fife out Brayshaw really showed his limits there, and he really showed what he can be capable of. And I was super, super impressed. I wasn't sold on him last year. I thought he was maybe just going to trickle into a bit part player, but I think he showed this year that he can be huge impact.
He's definitely improved. I think when the game against Hawthorn, where he outgot Tom Mitchell in terms of disposals, he was way more efficient than Mitchell, and he swung the game in Freo's favour in many ways. So I think he's definitely deserves to be P-plates. But we both bought into the Matty Rowell hype.
Yeah.
He's only played 4 games, but he's just such a genuine footy player.
He is. He's the kind of midfielder I love to watch. Obviously, such a small sample size, but if he can keep up even 80% of what he's putting out for another 2-3 years, he is going to be up there in your tier 2s, if not tier 1.
Maybe he's only just passed his driving test in terms of some of his other players, but he definitely deserves his Ps, I think.
Oh, definitely.
Cam Guthrie, I think he's showing the quality of a tier 3 player for me now. I just think he needs to do it for a bit more.
Definitely. It's a sort of a newish system at Geelong. Like, he's playing a role that he hasn't really played much before, but he is doing it very, very well.
I think Jager O'Meara is the big reason why Warple can't make tier 3 at the moment. I just think his output's dropped as a result of O'Meara being in the side.
It definitely has. I have a lot of issues with Warple's fitness, to be honest. I find he'll have a quarter that he could be a tier 2 player, for sure. But then you might not see him again for another 2 quarters.
We saw that against Freo. I think he had 13 at the half and barely touched it again in the second.
Yeah.
He definitely flicks in and out of games. Now, we've taken liberties with 2 players here. I've grabbed one, you've grabbed one.
Yeah.
Of course, your one's from Carlton. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so I've put in Sammy Walsh. I think he's having at least at the start of the year, he had a really bad case of second-year blues. He's really picked up these last couple of games. I think he's showing what he is able to do. He just needs a bit more confidence, and I just really want to see him lift his head. That's what I really need to see from him. Too much panic from a young player is not good. He needs to get more comfortable with having the ball because he is going to be a very key role in our team moving forward.
And I've gone with Shai Bolden. I think he's got the output of a tier 3 player. Like Guthrie, he needs to do it for longer. I think the concern with Bolden is, can he retain his spot while Richmond's fitness continues to improve? I think that's where Bolton's issue is for me.
And that's a lot of issues with a lot of very good Richmond players, to be honest, with how much chops and changes have happened in their squad this year, is can they really keep it up?
Last one we squeezed into our Ps is Lockie Hunter. Ironic because he's going to be on those for a long time now. I think he's another one where he can set up and be counted. I just don't think he does it enough.
No, you're definitely right. And again, it's that Bulldogs ladder, right? Bont tier 1, McRae tier 2, Dunkley tier 3. Can you put Hunter in there with Dunkley in tier 3? I would argue not at the moment.
Not right now.
But there's definitely, like, he has a long way that I still think he can grow, and he can definitely bust into tier 3, if not tier 2.
Another one I want to mention here in this P-player section that isn't on our list, but I don't think he deserves a mention now we're talking about the Bulldogs, is Bailey Smith.
Oh, yes, of course. I agree.
Because I feel like he could almost definitely get a legitimate spot on this P-players list, because hasn't he had some season?
He really, really has. Second year, right? Yeah, so he's sort of gone the opposite way to Walshy. He wasn't... It's not that he was a bad player in his first season, but he wasn't super impactful, and maybe he struggled purely because of guys like Bont, McRae, and Dunkley. But this year, he's really turned it up a notch, and I've loved what he's done. Yeah,
for sure. Now, we'll go to Limbo now. So Limbo is players that have been in these tiers before. Most have been in, I would say, 2 at one point, even if it was just fleeting. But now... I mean, they're still good. These are almost the honourable mentions, I would say.
It's definitely an honourable mentions. I think I'll start with 2 that I think are very obvious, which is Matt Crouch and Rory Sloane.
Yeah.
A huge part of that very, well, I guess you would call them successful Adelaide side of 2017.
The lightning in a bottle team.
Yeah. They're both absolute guns, massive contested ball winners. Before that crazy titch year, Crouch had the disposals record. Granted, that included finals, but... Nonetheless, they were both very, very good players, but I think with where Adelaide are at the moment, you can't put them in any tier. They're getting consistently punished in the midfield week in and week out.
Angus Brayshaw, I think, was another one who had one great season, phenomenally polled third in the Brownlow in 2017.
Yeah, it wasn't even invited, right?
Yeah, sat at home on the couch with us probably at that point. But look, I think he's been, I wouldn't say he's been poor this season.
No, it's
but
not.
But he hasn't been the Angus Brayshaw that we've seen him be.
And you can't compare him with guys like JPK, Dunkley, Tim Kelly, Elliot Yeo at the moment, right? Maybe that one year you could have, but at the moment he's not doing it enough.
Jack Viney, similar vein. I think he's a quality player. He's essential for Clayton Oliver to have in the team. I think that will always be his role, though, is to support Oliver.
Yeah, and I'll put him next to another guy who I think fills the sort of same role as Cochin. I think they've both realised what their team needs and that they can't quite can't quite provide it at the moment. So they've taken a little step back and just done what they need to do. But yeah, they're not in the same conversation as these other players at the moment, I don't think. Not that they never were, obviously. They've both been very, very good players before. But yeah, at the moment, they're just not doing it for me.
So you mentioned culture. We'll talk about some other veterans out of the fan that way into this list. I think Tom Liberatore at this point counts as a veteran.
Yeah.
He's been around for long enough.
He definitely does, even though he looks 13.
Joel Selwood, obviously. Mark Murphy's another one. I think those three guys for me, they've been around for a lot. Ollie Wine's another one that I think deserves mention here as well.
Yeah.
I had Wines in 3 initially. We bumped him down to limbo. I think Wines you could very much make a case for at the end of this season if his form continues. I think he's earned his right to go back into 3.
Yeah, I just think he's had a few too... Like, with how Boak played, I watched Port and I never really noticed Wines. This year, he's having a better year, and I would love to see him continue it, but I just don't think he adapted in the way that he needs to. He's a slower player. His disposal isn't necessarily the best, but he can find a lot of contested ball. I think he needs to work on his fitness. But yeah, if what he's done this year continues, he definitely is a case for tier 3, but at the moment I just can't really put him there.
Ed Kerno's one that's also gone in here. Very much another Robin type player for me. He's always going to be a Robin. That's not a criticism. Some players fill that role perfectly. I can't see him getting back into the tiers though at this point.
Oh no, I think this was I definitely forced him in here. I think he definitely deserves a mention, but it's mostly because he's never going to be... he's not like your Pendlebury's, your Neils, or even someone like... He's not like your Zorkos or anything like that. But he gets his touches, he feels his role, and he's very, very versatile. He can go forward, he can tag, he can play wing, he can play inside. He does what he needs to do. And I think if someone with, say, the skill level of Wines had the adaptability of Kerno, well, then you're talking a tier 3, possibly even tier 2 player. But unfortunately, both of them only have one. You know what I mean?
Who else have you got? You've put a couple more in there.
I've got... Mark Murphy, did you talk about him?
Yeah, we talked about him.
Yeah, and then I've got Shane Edwards and Silk. So I think Sean Burgoyne, obviously, he's transitioned into more of a rebound defender. But he oozes
class, doesn't he?
He does. He really does ooze class. He can hit someone on the tit from 50 metres away, darting bullet pass, and you don't see that enough these days with these new age midfielders. And I had Shane Edwards in here purely from, I think, his role in that insane Dustin Martin year Richmond side was phenomenal. He really just did what he needed to do, found a lot of the footy, and I just think he went really, really underappreciated. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to keep it up, and so he definitely falls into this limbo category, but I did just want to talk about how good that season was for him.
For sure. So looking through these essentially 5 tiers, Western Bulldogs, Brisbane, West Coast are the 3 that stand out for me. Honourable mention Collingwood for the top 4 midfields. Any disagreement there?
No disagreement at all. I think that's 100% right.
There's too many strong players. One thing I think is very interesting though is that you look at Fremantle have no players apart from Andy Brayshaw and the P's after 5.
Yeah.
There's no others in the top 3 for Carlton apart from Cripps. They get a couple more in the Limbo and P's. But you see some very top heavy teams in this list. I think that GWS may have had some other better players on a different day. Maybe Taranto gets in on a different year.
You got Taranto, Hopper, even arguably Callum Ward once upon a time. But no, I don't. I think, and we'll talk about this later. I just think that. Yeah, for GWS, they've kind of missed it a little bit. They could have really developed something special, but they just failed to do so.
Yeah, they were another lightning in the bottle side, like we talked about with Adelaide, I think, for me. St Kilda only have 1 anywhere, which is a phenomenal effort for them to be where they are.
Yeah.
Still, he gets no help.
He really doesn't.
Billings never turned into the player he was meant to be.
He didn't.
Hunter Clark doesn't even play the role that he needs to. I think Hunter Clark can play midfield.
I think he can too. I think Brad Hill has his moments too. He's probably hasn't been what they wanted.
I think that Brad Hill is the perfect symptom of what we're talking about with North Melbourne and St Kilda before.
Overthrowing money at settling players.
They've settled for a player. And look, Hill was fantastic with the Dockers, and he was a really good player for us here. But he's just not at that level.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree.
And they're paying him some obscene amount of money as well.
Yeah, I think he's on like an $800,000 contract or something.
It's absurd.
It is.
He's just not... If you're paying $100K a year for a player, it needs to be at least a tier 2 guy.
At least, yeah.
And I don't think he was ever in the top 3 tiers at all.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that he was.
I think the best humanity...
At least consistently. No. Maybe he snuck in there week to week, but no. I don't think at the end of a season you could really have put him in there.
That's fair. Well, look, Jaden, that pretty much wraps us up in terms of our tier list. We'll run through them again very quickly just for the recap. So tier 1, we had Bont, Cripps, Fife and Dangerfield. Tier 2 was Pendlebury, Neal, Josh Kelly, Clayton Oliver, Boak, Tom Mitchell, Dusty Martin, McRae, Trelaw, Canelio and Gaff. 3 was JPK, Dunkley, Shield, Parker, Jared Lyons, Tim Kelly, Elliot Yeo, Sheed, Higgins, Ben Cunnington, Taylor Adams, Steele Sidebottom, Zach Merritt, Mitch Duncan, Zorko and Steele. P players, we had Brayshaw, Rowell, Guthrie, Warple, Sam Walsh got in there, Lockie Hunter also got in there, as did Shai Bolton. And in limbo, Kerno, Brayshaw, Crouch, Sloan, Viney, Cochin, Sheds, Sean Burgoyne, Murphy, Gadge, Joel Selwood, Ollie Wines, and Tom Liberatore. Well, Jaden, that wraps us up for the first episode of the Darting Around podcast. Pleasure to have you on.
Oh, love to be here. Can't wait. I hope it goes for a while. We've got some really good insights into a lot of topics, I think.
Exactly right. So next episode, I think, is one that I'm really looking forward to talking about. It's about Richmond, about their rise and the fall of some of the teams that have taken them on in the past. So you can listen to that one straight away after this one. We hope you enjoy that one too. Jaden, pleasure as always, and I'll see you next time.
Yep, can't wait.